Rachel had always been a morning person. She loved those quiet hours before the rest of the world woke up, when she could sit with her coffee and just think. This particular Wednesday started like any other. The kitchen was warm, sunlight was streaming through the window, and she had her laptop open, checking emails before heading to work. Most of it was the usual stuff. Newsletters she never read but couldn't bring herself to unsubscribe from. Work updates about meetings she'd rather skip. A few spam messages promising she'd won contests she never entered. She was about to close the laptop when one email caught her attention. The subject line was simple. "Do you remember this day?" What made her pause wasn't the words. It was the sender. The email address didn't have a name attached to it, just a random jumble of numbers and letters that looked like someone had smashed their keyboard. No company name, no profile picture, nothing that would tell her who this person was or why they were writing to her. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Everything in her brain screamed that this was probably spam. Maybe even one of those phishing scams her IT department was always warning everyone about. Delete it and move on with your day, she thought. But she didn't. There was something about those 5 words that felt personal, like whoever sent this actually knew her, like they were asking a real question, not just using some generic subject line designed to trick people into clicking. She glanced toward the stairs. Her husband Alex was still upstairs in the shower. She could hear the water running through the old pipes. She had a few minutes before he came down for breakfast. She clicked the email. For a second, nothing happened. The screen seemed to freeze and she wondered if her laptop was acting up again. Then the image started to load, slowly, from top to bottom, like it was being downloaded from somewhere far away. And then she saw it. The coffee mug slipped in her hand. She caught it just before it spilled, but some coffee sloshed onto the table. She didn't even notice. There she was. 10 years younger. Her hair was longer back then, sun-bleached and wild from the ocean breeze. She was wearing that old blue sundress she'd loved so much, the one she'd eventually thrown away because looking at it hurt too much. She was smiling in the photo. Really smiling. The kind of smile that came from deep happiness. The kind you can't fake. But it wasn't seeing herself that made her heart stop. It was him. Standing next to her in the photograph, his arm around her shoulders, was Tom, the man she hadn't seen in 10 years. The man who had vanished from her life like he'd never existed at all. Rachel's hands started shaking. She knew this photo, or at least she thought she did. It was taken at the beach on a day that felt like a lifetime ago now. They'd driven 3 hours to get there, singing badly to old songs the whole way. They'd spent the entire day in the sun, talking about their future like it was this certain solid thing they could reach out and touch. That was supposed to be one of the best days of her life. Back when she thought she knew what her future looked like. Back when she thought Tom would be in it. She stared at the photo and all those old feelings came rushing back. The confusion, the hurt, the anger, but also something else she didn't want to admit. A tiny flutter of something that felt dangerously close to hope. Tom had left without warning. One day he was there talking about getting a bigger apartment together, maybe adopting a dog. The next day he was gone. His apartment was empty. His phone was disconnected. His friends all claimed they had no idea where he went. It was like he'd decided overnight that their entire relationship meant nothing. She'd tried everything to find him. Called his family, who seemed genuinely shocked. Filed a missing person report, though the police weren't much help. Adults are allowed to disappear if they want to, they'd told her. There was no sign of foul play, no evidence of anything wrong. Just a guy who apparently decided to start over somewhere new without the burden of his old life. Without her. Rachel had spent months trying to understand it. What had she done wrong? Had there been signs she'd missed? Was he seeing someone else? Did he just wake up one day and realize he didn't love her anymore? Eventually, she had to accept that she might never know. She had to pack up all those questions and all that pain and try to move on. It took years, honestly. Years before she could even think about dating again. Years before she could trust someone enough to let them in. And then she'd met Alex. Sweet, steady Alex, who had been patient with her walls and her fears. Who had never pushed when she couldn't talk about certain things. Who had slowly, carefully shown her that not everyone leaves. They'd been married for 3 years now. She was happy. Really genuinely happy. She'd built a good life, a safe life. She rarely thought about Tom anymore. Or at least that's what she told herself. But now here was this photo dragging everything back to the surface. She heard the water shut off upstairs. Alex would be down any minute. She quickly closed the laptop, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Why would someone send this to her? After all this time, why now? She wiped up the spilled coffee, trying to act normal, but her mind was spinning. Who even had this photo? She didn't remember anyone taking pictures of them that day. They'd taken some selfies on her old phone, but this wasn't one of those. This was taken from a distance, like someone had been watching them. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Alex came into the kitchen, his hair still wet from the shower. "Morning," he said, kissing her cheek. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Didn't sleep great." He poured himself coffee and started talking about his day, something about a big presentation at work. Rachel nodded in all the right places, made the appropriate responses, but she wasn't really hearing him. Her mind was stuck on that photo, on Tom's face, on the mystery of who sent it and why. After Alex left for work, she opened the laptop again. Her hands were steadier now, but her heart was still racing. She looked at the photo more carefully this time, zooming in, examining every detail. That's when she noticed it. In the background, partially hidden behind a beach umbrella, was another person, just a shadow really, but definitely a person, and they were holding something. It took her a minute to make it out, but when she did, her blood went cold. A camera. Someone had been photographing them that day. Someone had been watching them, taking pictures from a distance, capturing moments they didn't even know were being recorded. This wasn't just some old friend stumbling across an old photo and feeling nostalgic. This was something else, something deliberate. Rachel sat back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. None of them were good. She knew she should delete the email. Forget about it. Move on with her life. She had Alex now. She had moved past all of this, but her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. She hit reply and typed, "Who are you? What do you want?" She stared at the message for a long moment before pressing send. The moment she did, she knew there was no going back. Whatever door this email had opened, she'd just walked through it. Now all she could do was wait for an answer. Rachel couldn't focus on anything that day. She went through the motions at work, answering emails, attending meetings, nodding when people talked to her. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. It was stuck on that photo, on Tom's face, on the question she'd sent into the void. "Who are you? What do you want?" She checked her email every few minutes. Nothing. Just the usual work stuff and more spam. No response from the mysterious sender. Part of her wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe she should check again, make sure that email was real. During her lunch break, she sat in her car instead of going to the cafeteria. She pulled out her phone and opened her personal email again. The photo was still there. Tom's smile was still the same. And she still had no answers. She found herself staring at his face, remembering things she'd worked hard to forget. The way he used to make terrible jokes just to see her laugh. How he'd always ordered extra fries because he knew she'd steal half of his. The sound of his voice when he'd tell her about his dreams, his plans, all the things he wanted to do. That summer had been perfect. Or at least it had seemed perfect at the time. They'd been together for almost 2 years. They were young, sure, but it felt real, solid. They'd started looking at apartments, talking about moving in together. Tom had this idea about starting his own photography business. He was good with a camera, always had been. He'd take pictures of everything. Sunsets, street corners, people who didn't know they were being photographed. Rachel remembered asking him once why he loved photography so much. He'd said something about capturing moments that would otherwise disappear, preserving things before they were gone. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Everything had seemed fine right up until the end. That was what made it so confusing. There had been no fight, no warning signs, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. They'd had dinner together on a Tuesday night. Tom had seemed normal, maybe a bit distracted, but nothing alarming. He'd kissed her goodnight and said he'd call her the next day. He never called. When she tried to reach him the next morning, his phone went straight to voicemail. She figured he was busy, maybe his battery died, but by evening she started to worry. She drove to his apartment and found it empty. Not just empty of Tom, but empty of everything. Hi. His furniture, his clothes, his camera equipment, all of it was gone, like he'd never lived there at all. The landlord told her Tom had broken his lease and moved out overnight. paid the penalty fee and everything. No forwarding address. Rachel had stood in that empty apartment, her mind refusing to accept what was happening. People don't just vanish. Not in real life. Not without a reason. She'd called his friends, his co-workers, even his family. Everyone seemed genuinely shocked. His mother had cried on the phone, saying she didn't understand, that Tom hadn't mentioned anything about leaving. His best friend since high school swore he had no idea where Tom had gone. The police had been sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. Tom was an adult. He'd paid his debts, broken no laws. He had every right to leave if he wanted to. They'd filed a report, done some basic checking, but there was nothing to investigate. No evidence of foul play. No suggestion he was in danger. Just a guy who decided to disappear. Rachel had spent months trying to make sense of it. She'd gone through every conversation they'd had, looking for clues she'd missed. Had he been unhappy? Was there someone else? Had she done something wrong? The not knowing was the worst part. If he'd broken up with her, at least she would have understood. If he'd told her he didn't love her anymore, it would have hurt. But it would have been something. Instead, she was left with this gaping hole where answers should be. Eventually, she'd had to accept that maybe there were no answers. Maybe Tom had his reasons, and she'd never know what they were. She'd packed up the few things he'd left at her place, put them in a box in her closet, and tried to move forward. It had taken a long time, longer than she wanted to admit. She'd thrown herself into work, spent time with friends, went through the motions of living. Slowly, painfully, she'd started to heal. The sharp edge of the pain had dulled into something she could live with. Meeting Alex had helped. He was different from Tom in almost every way. Steady where Tom had been spontaneous. Predictable where Tom had been full of surprises. At first, Rachel had thought that was exactly what she needed. Someone who wouldn't disappear on her. Someone safe. But over time, she'd come to genuinely love Alex for who he was, not just for what he wasn't. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He was there every single day, exactly when he said he would be. That counted for something. That counted for a lot. She'd told Alex about Tom early in their relationship. Not everything, but enough. That she'd been in a serious relationship before. That it had ended badly. That she had some trust issues she was working through. Alex had been understanding, patient. He'd never pushed her to talk about it more than she wanted to. Now sitting in her car, staring at this old photo, Rachel felt like she was betraying Alex somehow. Not because she still had feelings for Tom. She didn't. At least she was pretty sure she didn't. But because this email had stirred up all these old emotions she thought she'd buried, and she hadn't told Alex about it, she should tell him. She knew that, but something stopped her. Maybe because she didn't know what this was yet. Maybe because she was afraid of what it might mean. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex asking what she wanted for dinner. She typed back something about pasta, keeping it normal, keeping it light. Like her world hadn't just tilted sideways. The afternoon dragged on forever. Rachel went through her tasks on autopilot, checking her email obsessively. Still nothing. Maybe whoever sent the photo had changed their mind. Maybe they'd realized they'd made a mistake. By the time she got home, she'd almost convinced herself to forget the whole thing. Alex had ordered from their favorite Italian place. They ate dinner, watched TV, talked about their days. Rachel left out the part about the mysterious email and the photo that had knocked her sideways. Alex fell asleep around 10. He always did. He could fall asleep anywhere, anytime, like he had some kind of superpower. Rachel envied that. She'd always been a light sleeper, easily kept awake by racing thoughts. Tonight was no exception. She lay there in the dark, listening to Alex breathe, her mind spinning. Finally, around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She grabbed her phone and crept downstairs, careful not to wake him. She made tea she didn't really want and opened her laptop. Her email was still open from earlier. She was about to close it when she saw it. A new message, sent at 2:47 a.m., the same mysterious sender. Her hand shook slightly as she clicked it open. This time there were more photos. 3 of them, all from that same day at the beach. Different angles, different moments. One of her and Tom walking along the shoreline. Another of them sitting on a blanket. A third of them laughing at something, their heads close together. Below the photos was a message. Short and direct. He didn't leave you by choice. Meet me tomorrow. Blue Line Cafe on Maple Street. Noon. Come alone. I have information about what really happened to Tom. Rachel read the message 3 times. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He didn't leave by choice. 4 words that changed everything. 4 words that opened up possibilities she'd forced herself to stop thinking about years ago. What did that mean? Had something happened to Tom? Was he in trouble? Had someone made him disappear? And who was this person who had these photos? How did they know what happened? Why were they reaching out now after all this time? The logical part of her brain screamed warnings. This could be a trap. It could be dangerous. Meeting a stranger who'd been sending anonymous emails was probably the worst idea ever. But the other part of her brain, the part that had spent 10 years wondering and waiting and never getting closure, that part was already decided. She had to know. After all this time, after all the questions that had haunted her, someone was finally offering answers. How could she walk away from that? She wrote back, "I'll be there." She sent the message before she could change her mind. Then she sat in the quiet kitchen, the glow of the laptop screen the only light, and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. Upstairs, Alex was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that his wife's past had just reached out and grabbed her by the throat. Rachel knew she should wake him up, tell him everything. But she couldn't, not yet. Not until she knew what this was. She'd go to the cafe tomorrow. She'd hear what this person had to say, and then she'd decide what to do next. The truth was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. Rachel barely slept. When her alarm went off at 7, she'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running through 1,000 different scenarios in her head. Who would be at that cafe? What would they tell her? And most importantly, was any of it true? Alex noticed something was off over breakfast. He kept glancing at her, that concerned look on his face that meant he wanted to ask if she was okay but wasn't sure if he should. "You seem distracted," he finally said, pouring more coffee into her cup. "Everything all right?" Rachel forced a smile. "Just have a lot on my mind with work." Nothing major. The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. She hated lying to Alex. They'd built their relationship on honesty, on trust. But how could she explain this? How could she tell him that someone had sent her photos of an old boyfriend and claimed he didn't leave by choice? That she was about to meet a complete stranger to hear about a man she'd supposedly moved on from a decade ago? She told Alex she had a dentist appointment at noon. Another lie. They were piling up now, and each one made her feel worse. But she was in too deep to turn back. The morning crawled by. Rachel tried to work from home, but she couldn't concentrate. She kept checking the clock. 11, 11:30, 11:45. Each minute felt like an hour. At 11:30, she got in her car and drove to Maple Street. The Blue Line Cafe was a small place she'd passed 100 times but never been inside. It had those big windows that let you see everyone sitting inside, and somehow that made her feel slightly better. At least it was public. Safe. She arrived 15 minutes early and sat in her car across the street watching the cafe. People came and went. A couple with a baby stroller. An old man with a newspaper. A woman typing furiously on her laptop. Normal people doing normal things, while Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. At noon exactly, she took a deep breath and walked inside. The cafe smelled like coffee and fresh bread. There were maybe a dozen tables, most of them occupied. Rachel stood near the entrance, scanning faces, wondering who she was looking for. Nobody seemed to be watching for her. Nobody looked suspicious or out of place. She ordered a coffee she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. She chose a table near the window and sat down, her back to the wall so she could see the door. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Rachel started to wonder if this was some kind of cruel joke. Maybe someone just wanted to mess with her head, send her on a wild chase for answers that didn't exist. Then a woman walked in. She was maybe in her early 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, nothing that stood out, but her eyes scanned the cafe with purpose, like she was looking for someone. When her gaze landed on Rachel, she paused. Then she walked over. "Rachel?" Her voice was quiet, careful. Rachel nodded, not trusting her voice. The woman sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing and probably frightening. My name is Helen. I'm a private investigator." She paused, then added softly, "Cousin, I'm Tom's aunt." Rachel felt the air leave her lungs. Tom's aunt. She'd met Tom's mother once, briefly, during that horrible week after he disappeared. But she'd never met any other family members. Helen pulled out her wallet and showed Rachel her investigator's license, like she wanted to prove she was real. I've been looking for answers about my nephew for 10 years, and I finally found something. Where is he? The words came out more forcefully than Rachel intended. Is he alive? What happened? Helen's expression softened with something that looked like sympathy. I believe he's alive, but I don't know where he is. Let me explain. She pulled out a folder from her bag and set it on the table between them. Tom got involved in something dangerous right before he disappeared. He was working as a freelance photographer, taking pictures for local businesses, events, that kind of thing. One night, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Rachel's hands were shaking. She gripped her coffee cup to steady them. He witnessed something he shouldn't have, Helen continued. He was doing a photo shoot near the waterfront and he saw a business transaction that wasn't exactly legal. He didn't realize what he was seeing at first, but his camera captured everything. Faces, license plates, the whole thing. Helen opened the folder and pulled out some papers, though she didn't show them to Rachel yet. The man involved was Vincent Caruso. He owned several legitimate businesses in town, but he was also running some illegal operations on the side. Tom's photographs could have put him away for a long time. Rachel's mind was spinning. Tom went to the police? He tried to. But before he could, he got a visit. Two men showed up at his apartment one night. They told him they knew about the photos. They told him that if he went to the police, people he cared about would get hurt. Helen's voice dropped lower. They specifically mentioned you, Rachel. They described your car, where you worked, your daily routine. They made it clear they'd been watching. Rachel felt cold all over. What? Tom called me that night. He was terrified. Not for himself, but for you. He said the only way to keep you safe was to make you mean nothing to him. If these people thought you didn't matter anymore, they'd leave you alone. So he just left? Rachel's voice cracked. He could have told me. We could have figured it out together. Helen shook her head sadly. He thought about that. But these weren't people who made empty threats. And Tom knew that if you knew the truth, you'd try to help him. You'd be involved. He couldn't risk that. So he did the hardest thing he could do. He made you hate him. Rachel felt tears burning in her eyes. 10 years. 10 years of thinking Tom had simply stopped caring about her. 10 years of wondering what she'd done wrong, of questioning whether their entire relationship had been a lie. He emptied his apartment in one night. Helen continued. Changed his name, moved far away. He left behind everything and everyone he knew, including you. Especially you. Why didn't you tell me this before? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why wait 10 years? Because I didn't know, Helen said simply. Tom disappeared from my life too. He cut off all contact with everyone, including family. I think he was afraid that any connection to his old life would put people in danger. I hired investigators over the years, followed dead end after dead end. Then 6 months ago, I got a break. She pulled out another document. I found records of small bank withdrawals from an account Tom had set up before he disappeared. The most recent one was 3 months ago, in a small town in Oregon. Someone is still using that account. Someone who knows the password only Tom would know. Helen pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a man in his late 30s with a beard and different hair, but the eyes were unmistakable. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. That's him. That's Tom. I believe so, Helen said, but I haven't been able to locate him yet. The trail goes cold after that withdrawal. And there's another problem. What? Vincent Caruso was arrested 2 years ago on unrelated charges. He's in prison now, but his organization is still active. His son runs things now, and from what I've learned, he's even more dangerous than his father was. If I start poking around too loudly, asking too many questions, it could put Tom in danger. It could put you in danger. Rachel sat back in her chair, trying to process everything. Tom hadn't abandoned her. He'd sacrificed everything to protect her. Their relationship, his life, his identity, all of it gone because he loved her too much to let her get hurt. Why are you telling me this now? Rachel asked. After all this time, why reach out? Helen hesitated. Because I need your help, and because I thought you deserved to know the truth. Tom left some things behind when he disappeared. Personal belongings he couldn't take with him. They're in a storage unit, and it's registered under your name. What? Rachel had no memory of any storage unit. He set it up right before he left, used your information, paid for 10 years up front. I found the paperwork when I was going through old records. The unit is here in town. I need access to it. There might be something inside that could help me find him, or at least understand where he went. Rachel's mind was reeling. A storage unit in her name that she knew nothing about. 10 years of payments she'd never made. Tom had planned his disappearance down to the smallest detail. I don't have a key, Rachel said. I didn't even know it existed. The storage company can cut a new one if you show ID and the registration papers. I have copies. Helen pulled out another document. I know this is a lot to ask. I know you've moved on with your life. But if there's any chance of finding Tom, of making sure he's safe, those belongings might be our only lead. Rachel thought about Alex, waiting for her at home. About the life she'd built, the future they were planning. Opening this door meant stepping back into a past she'd worked so hard to leave behind, but it also meant finally getting answers. Finally understanding what had really happened. There's something else you should know, Helen said quietly. I found something when I was investigating. A letter. Tom wrote it the night before he disappeared. It's addressed to you, but he never sent it. He left it in his desk and his landlord found it when he was cleaning out the apartment. The landlord kept it all these years and when I tracked him down, he gave it to me. Helen pulled an envelope from her folder. Rachel could see her name written on the front in Tom's familiar handwriting. I haven't opened it, Helen said. It's yours. It was always meant for you. Rachel stared at the envelope like it might explode. Inside was Tom's voice, his explanation, his goodbye. Everything she'd wanted to know for 10 years was probably in there. Her hand shook as she reached for it. Take your time, Helen said gently. Read it when you're ready, and when you are. If you want to help me access that storage unit, call me. She slid a business card across the table. Rachel took both the envelope and the card, holding them like fragile, dangerous things. What if we find him? What then? Helen's smile was sad. I don't know. Maybe nothing changes. Maybe he needs to stay hidden. But at least we'd know he's okay. At least you'd have the closure you deserve. Closure. Rachel had thought she'd found that years ago. But maybe she'd just buried the questions instead of answering them. She left the cafe in a daze, the envelope burning in her hand. In her car, she sat for a long time, just staring at her name written in Tom's handwriting. Then she carefully tucked it into her bag and drove home, where Alex was waiting, where her normal life was waiting, completely unaware that everything had just shifted beneath her feet. Rachel sat in her car outside her house for almost an hour. She could see the lights on inside, could picture Alex moving around in the kitchen, probably starting dinner. He'd be wondering where she was. The dentist appointment should have been over by now. The envelope sat in her lap, still sealed. She'd picked it up a dozen times, almost opened it, then put it down again. What would Tom's words do to her? Would they make everything better or worse? Finally, she got out of the car and walked inside. Alex was at the stove stirring something that smelled like his grandmother's pasta sauce. He turned when she walked in and his smile faded when he saw her face. Rachel, what's wrong? What happened at the dentist? And just like that, she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep lying. Couldn't pretend everything was normal when her entire world had just been turned upside down. I didn't go to the dentist, she said quietly. Alex turned off the stove. Okay, where did you go? She sat down at the kitchen table, her legs suddenly feeling weak. I need to tell you something. And I need you to just listen until I'm done, because if you interrupt me, I might not be able to get through it. The concern on Alex's face deepened, but he nodded and sat down across from her. So she told him everything. The email, the photo, the meeting with Helen, the truth about why Tom disappeared, the storage unit, the letter she was holding. She told him all of it, watching his expression shift from confusion to shock to something she couldn't quite read. When she finished, there was a long silence. Alex stared at the envelope on the table between them. You lied to me, he said finally. His voice wasn't angry, just hurt. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't know what this was, and I didn't want to worry you until I understood it myself. Do you still love him? The question came out quiet, almost afraid of the answer. Rachel looked at her husband, this good man who'd been patient with her fears and her walls. No, I love you, but I need to know what happened. For 10 years, I thought I wasn't enough for him, that I did something wrong, that our whole relationship was a lie. And now I find out he left to protect me? That changes everything. Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. What do you need to do? The question surprised her. She'd expected anger, jealousy, maybe an ultimatum. What? You need closure? I get that. So what do you need to do to get it? Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I need to read the letter. And I think I need to see what's in that storage unit. Helen thinks there might be information about where Tom is now. And if you find him? Alex asked. What then? It was the question she'd been avoiding. I don't know. I just need to know he's okay. That he's safe. Does that make sense? Alex squeezed her hand. Yeah, it does. But Rachel, you need to be honest with yourself about what you're looking for. Are you looking for closure? Or are you looking for him? The question hit her like a punch to the gut. I don't know, she whispered. Then maybe you need to figure that out before you go any further. Alex stood up, kissed the top of her head, and went back to the stove. Read the letter. Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. Rachel sat there for a moment, overwhelmed by how lucky she was to have found someone like Alex. Then she picked up the envelope and went upstairs to their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, turning the envelope over in her hands. Tom's handwriting looked rushed, like he'd written her name quickly. She wondered what he'd been feeling when he wrote this. Fear? Sadness? Regret? Taking a deep breath, she carefully opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, front and back, covered in Tom's familiar scrawl. Her hand shook as she started to read. Rachel, if you're reading this, then either I'm dead or enough time has passed that it's safe for you to know the truth. I hope it's the second one. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved, because that person isn't me. Not because I don't love you, but because loving you means letting you go. Rachel's vision blurred with tears, but she kept reading. Tom explained everything in the letter, the photos he'd accidentally taken, the men who'd threatened him, the impossible choice he'd had to make. He wrote about the night he'd decided to leave, how he'd packed up his entire life while his hands shook and his heart broke. The hardest part isn't leaving, he wrote. It's knowing that you'll think I stopped loving you, that you'll blame yourself, that you'll wonder what you did wrong. Rachel, you did nothing wrong. You were perfect. You are perfect. And that's why I have to do this. Because if anything happened to you because of me, I couldn't live with myself. He wrote about how he'd thought about calling her 100 times, how he'd almost come back so many times, but he couldn't risk it. As long as those people thought she meant nothing to him, she'd be safe. I set up a storage unit in your name, the letter continued. Paid for 10 years. Inside are all the things I couldn't take with me but couldn't throw away either. Photos of us, the camera that started this whole mess. Some notebooks with ideas I had for my business, dreams I had for our future. I don't know why I'm keeping them. Maybe because throwing them away would feel like admitting that part of my life never happened. And it did happen. It was real. You were real. The next part made Rachel's heart ache. By the time you read this, you'll have moved on. You'll have found someone else. You'll have built a life that doesn't include me. And that's exactly what should happen. That's what I want for you. A normal life with someone who can actually be there for you. Someone who doesn't have to hide in the shadows. Someone who can give you the future you deserve. The letter ended with a few simple lines that broke Rachel's heart. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver, couldn't find another way. But mostly, I'm sorry I couldn't be the person who got to spend their life loving you. That was supposed to be the best part of my story, Rachel. You were supposed to be my happy ending. Take care of yourself, be happy, and please try to forgive me someday. Love always, Tom. Rachel sat on the bed, tears streaming down her face, the letter trembling in her hands. Tom had loved her. He'd left to protect her. Everything she'd believed for 10 years was wrong. She read the letter twice more, memorizing every word, every apology, every explanation. Then she carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. Alex was right. She needed to be honest with herself about what she was looking for. Was this about closure? Or was some part of her hoping to find Tom, to somehow pick up where they'd left off? She thought about the life she'd built with Alex, the home they shared, the plans they'd made, the quiet, steady love that had healed the broken parts of her. Did she really want to risk that? But she also thought about Tom, out there somewhere, still hiding, still running, still protecting her even now, 10 years later. Didn't she owe it to him to at least make sure he was okay? She went back downstairs. Alex was plating the pasta, moving around the kitchen like everything was normal. like his wife hadn't just told him she'd been investigating her ex-boyfriend's disappearance. "I read it," Rachel said. Alex turned to face her. "And? He loved me. He left to protect me. He's been hiding for 10 years because he thought those people would hurt me if they knew where he was. Do you want to find him?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I want to help Helen access the storage unit. I want to see if there's anything there that might tell us if he's safe. But Alex, I need you to know that I'm not looking to get him back. I'm not trying to restart something that ended a decade ago. I just need to know that he's okay. Can you understand that?" Alex studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "When do you want to go?" "We?" Rachel asked. "You think I'm letting you do this alone? After everything you just told me about dangerous people and threats?" Alex shook his head. "No way. If you're doing this, I'm coming with you. We do it together." Rachel felt a wave of love for this man who was secure enough to support her, even when it meant diving into her complicated past. "Thank you. But Rachel," Alex said seriously, "after we do this, after we find out what's in that storage unit and help Helen with whatever she needs, we're done with this. You get your closure and then we move forward. Deal?" "Deal," Rachel agreed. They ate dinner, and Rachel told Alex more details about her meeting with Helen. She showed him the business card, explained about the storage unit, about the bank withdrawals that suggested Tom was still alive somewhere in Oregon. That night, lying in bed, Rachel made a decision. Tomorrow she'd call Helen. They'd go to the storage unit together, see what Tom had left behind. Maybe there would be clues about where he'd gone, or maybe there would just be old memories and broken dreams. Either way, she'd finally get the answers she'd been waiting for. She'd know the truth about what happened, and then, somehow, she'd find a way to put this chapter of her life to rest for good. Next to her, Alex reached over and took her hand in the darkness. "Whatever we find tomorrow, we deal with it together, okay?" "Okay," Rachel whispered. She fell asleep holding his hand. The letter from Tom tucked away in her nightstand drawer, and tomorrow looming ahead with all its unknown possibilities. The storage facility was on the edge of town, one of those places Rachel had driven past 1,000 times without really noticing. Long rows of orange metal doors, each one hiding someone's past, someone's secrets. Helen was already waiting when Rachel and Alex pulled into the parking lot. She looked surprised when she saw Alex get out of the car with Rachel. "This is my husband, Alex," Rachel explained. "He knows everything. I hope that's okay." Helen nodded, though Rachel could see the concern in her eyes. Of course. The more people who care about finding Tom, the better. The storage unit was number 247, tucked away in a back corner. The manager had cut them a new key after Rachel showed her ID and the registration papers Helen had provided. Her hand shook slightly as she fitted the key into the lock. "You ready?" Alex asked quietly, his hand on her shoulder. Rachel nodded and turned the key. The lock clicked open. She grabbed the bottom of the metal door and pulled it up. It rattled loudly in the quiet morning air. Inside was darkness. Helen found a light switch on the wall and a single bulb flickered to life. The storage unit wasn't large, maybe 10 by 10 feet, but it was full. Boxes were stacked neatly against the walls. A few larger items were covered with sheets. The air smelled stale and dusty, like a time capsule that had been sealed for too long. Rachel stepped inside slowly like she was entering a museum. In a way, she was. This was a museum of the life she'd almost had, the future that never happened. Helen pulled out her phone, turning on the flashlight for extra light. "Let's see what we have here." They started with the boxes closest to the door. The first one Rachel opened was full of photographs. Not just photos of her and Tom, though there were plenty of those, but photos of everything: sunsets, street corners, random people, buildings. Tom had always been taking pictures, capturing moments that most people would never notice. Rachel pulled out a photo of herself sitting on a park bench, reading a book. She didn't remember Tom taking this. She probably hadn't even known he was there. In the photo, she looked peaceful, happy, young in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with not knowing what was coming. "He really loved photography," Alex said, looking over her shoulder. There was no jealousy in his voice, just observation. The next box contained notebooks. Rachel opened one and found pages and pages of Tom's handwriting. Business plans for his photography company, ideas for photo series, lists of equipment he wanted to buy, dreams written down like they were going to happen. Helen was going through boxes on the other side of the unit. "Rachel, come look at this." Rachel set down the notebook and walked over. Helen had found Tom's cameras. Not just one, but several, all carefully packed in foam. Professional equipment that must have cost thousands of dollars. This was the gear Tom had been building his business with. The tools of the trade he'd had to abandon. "This is worth a lot of money," Helen said. "Why would he leave all this behind?" "Because taking it would have made him easier to track," Alex said. He'd been quiet, mostly watching, but now he stepped forward. "If someone's looking for a photographer who disappeared, they'd watch for someone selling expensive camera equipment or using it professionally." He had to start completely over. Helen nodded slowly. "That makes sense." He really thought this through. They kept searching. More boxes of photos, some of Tom's clothes still folded neatly, books he'd been reading. A coffee mug Rachel recognized from his apartment. Small pieces of a life interrupted. Then Rachel found something that made her breath catch, a small box different from the others. When she opened it, she found jewelry inside. Not expensive jewelry, but meaningful. A bracelet she'd given Tom for his birthday. A necklace she'd worn every day when they were together. Things she'd thought were lost. He'd kept them all. He couldn't let go either, Rachel said softly. At the back of the unit, covered by a sheet, they found a filing cabinet. Helen pulled the sheet off and dust flew everywhere, making them all cough. The cabinet was locked, but Helen had come prepared. She pulled out a small toolkit and got to work on the lock. "Years of investigating," she explained as she worked. "You learn a few tricks." The lock clicked open after a few minutes. Inside were files, organized and labeled. Helen pulled them out one by one, scanning through them quickly with her investigator's eye. "These are copies of the photos," she said, pulling out a folder. "The ones he took of that illegal transaction." "He kept copies. Why would he do that?" Rachel asked. "Wouldn't that be dangerous?" "Insurance," Alex said. "If those people ever came after him, he'd have proof of what he saw. Leverage." Helen kept digging through the files. Birth certificates, social security cards, documents that would help someone build a new identity. And then near the bottom, she found something else. "Wait," she said, pulling out a paper. "This is recent." Rachel and Alex crowded around her. It was a bank statement dated just 6 weeks ago. Not the account Helen had mentioned before, but a different one. And it showed a deposit, not a withdrawal. Someone had put money into this account. A lot of money. "Why would he need to put money into an old account?" Rachel asked. Helen's eyes widened. "Unless it wasn't for him. Unless it was for someone else." She looked up at Rachel. "This account is in your name, too. It's a joint account." "I didn't realize that before because I only saw the withdrawal records, not the full account details." Rachel felt dizzy. "Tom put money in an account for me, why?" "Look at the amount," Helen said, pointing to the number. $20,000. That's not a small amount. That's enough to help someone if they needed it. That's enough to make a difference." Alex took the statement from Helen and studied it. "When did you say Vincent Caruso's son took over the operation?" "About 3 years ago," Helen said. "And when did the last deposit happen before this one?" Helen checked her notes. 3 years and 2 months ago." The pieces clicked together in Rachel's mind. Tom stopped putting money in the account when the son took over. When things got more dangerous. But 6 weeks ago, he put in one more deposit. A big one. "Why would he do that now?" Alex asked. Helen's expression changed. "Unless he thinks the danger is ending. Or unless he thinks it's getting worse and he wants to make sure Rachel is taken care of if something happens to him." The three of them stood in the dusty storage unit, surrounded by the remnants of Tom's old life, trying to figure out what his recent action meant. "We need to trace this deposit," Helen said. "Find out where it came from. That might tell us where Tom is now." But Rachel barely heard her. She was thinking about something else. Tom had been watching over her for 10 years. Even from wherever he was hiding, even with all the danger he faced, he'd been thinking about her. Making sure she'd be okay. "I don't want the money," Rachel said suddenly. Helen and Alex both looked at her. "If you find Tom," Rachel continued, "tell him I don't want the money. Tell him I'm okay. I'm happy. I have a good life with someone who loves me." She looked at Alex. "Tell him he doesn't need to protect me anymore. Tell him it's okay to stop running." Helen studied Rachel's face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll tell him. If I find him." They spent another hour going through the storage unit, but there were no more revelations. Just more pieces of a life that Tom had carefully preserved and then left behind. As they were packing up to leave, Rachel kept out one thing. A single photograph, not one of her and Tom together, but one Tom had taken of her alone. She was laughing at something, her eyes bright with happiness. She didn't remember the moment, but she remembered feeling that way when she was with Tom. Young and hopeful and certain that the future would be kind. She showed it to Alex on the way to the car. "Is it okay if I keep this?" Alex looked at the photo, then at his wife. "Of course. It's part of your story. You don't have to erase it just because we're married." That night, Rachel put the photo in her nightstand drawer right next to Tom's letter. She didn't need to look at them every day. She didn't need to dwell on what might have been. But she needed to know they were there. Proof that it had all been real. That she'd been loved in a way that had asked for nothing in return. Helen called a week later. She'd traced the deposit. It came from a small town in Oregon, just like she'd suspected. She was getting close to finding Tom. Did Rachel want to know when she found him? Rachel thought about it for a long time. Then she told Helen yes, but only to know that he was safe. She didn't need to talk to him. She didn't need to see him. She just needed to know he was okay. 2 weeks after that, Helen called again. She'd found him. He was alive, living under a different name, working as a carpenter. He was safe. The people who'd threatened him were being investigated by federal authorities now. It wouldn't be long before they were arrested. Soon Tom could come home if he wanted to. Helen had told Tom about Rachel, about her life now, about how she was happy. And Tom had smiled, Helen said. A real smile, the first one she'd seen from him in years. He'd asked Helen to tell Rachel that he was glad, that she deserved every bit of happiness she'd found. He also said he wouldn't be coming back. Too much time had passed. He'd built a new life and she'd built hers. Some stories don't need to be reopened. Some endings are exactly what they should be. Rachel cried when she hung up the phone. But they weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief, of closure, of finally understanding that sometimes people leave not because they don't love you, but because they love you too much to let you get hurt. That evening, she and Alex went for a walk in the park where she'd sat on that bench all those years ago, where Tom had photographed her without her knowing. The park looked different now. Everything looked different now. But different didn't mean worse. It just meant changed. And sometimes change, even painful change, led you exactly where you needed to be. Alex took her hand as they walked, and Rachel held on tight. This was her life now. This was her present and her future. And she was finally completely ready to live in it.